Welcome to the deep dive. So, you've given us quite a collection of information here, and our job today, Sunday, May 18th, 2025, is really to synthesize it, kind of get past the headlines and understand what's truly going on.
Absolutely. It's a really dynamic snapshot you've presented. We're going to be digging into, well, a maritime incident right here in New York, some really devastating weather across the Midwest and South.
Yeah, those reports are awful.
They are. And then there's a concerning terrorism investigation in California, a jailbreak down in New Orleans. Quite a mix.
Plus the release of those interview recordings, right? And political fights over policy.
Exactly. The Biden-Her recordings, clashes over tax and energy policy, and even a pretty significant global religious event with the new pope.
Okay, quite the range.
Yeah.
So the mission here is to distill the key info and maybe see, the bigger picture from all these different threads.
That's the plan.
All right, let's start close to home then. This incident in the East River, a Mexican Navy training vessel hitting the Brooklyn Bridge. I mean, how does that even happen?
It's pretty shocking, right? Initial reports say the collision caused, significant damage to the ship. Its masts apparently just snapped off.
Wow.
And tragically, 2 Mexican Navy crew members lost their lives. At least 19 others were injured.
Just awful. So the big question is how? How does a, sophisticated ship hit a huge, very stationary bridge?
Exactly. That's what the investigation is zeroing in on. They're looking at a few possibilities. Navigational errors are high on the list.
Like misjudging something.
Yeah.
Speed, position.
Yeah, or issues with the tech, the navigational data maybe. They'll also look at weather, though it doesn't seem like that was the main factor based on what we know now.
Okay.
And of course, a full check for any mechanical problems on the ship itself. Standard procedure, but crucial.
It really makes you think about safety in the harbor. It's such a busy area.
It absolutely does. And it highlights the challenges of navigating these complex urban waterways with all the infrastructure, bridges, tunnels, other ships.
Yeah.
It demands really precise navigation and, strict adherence to safety protocols. We might see a review of those protocols, maybe even the navigational aids in that specific area because of this.
Yeah, I could see that. Okay, moving from infrastructure challenges here to, the sheer force of nature causing devastation. These storms in the Midwest and South,
Yeah.
the reports are just grim.
They really are. This is a powerful storm system. We're talking heavy rain, really strong winds, and it seems likely tornadoes, too.
A brutal combination.
And the impact is widespread. Homes, businesses, infrastructure, extensive damage across several states.
And the human cost.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part.
Yeah. Tragically, the death toll has been rising. It seems Kentucky and Missouri got hit the hardest. At least 27 deaths confirmed so far. It really underscores the danger these storms pose.
Unimaginable for those communities. When you see the pictures, it's just flattened areas.
Total devastation in places. The immediate response is focused on search and rescue, of course, trying to find anyone trapped or missing. And then there's the huge job of clearing debris just to get access and providing shelter, food, water for people who've lost everything.
It really feels like we're dealing with these extreme weather events more and more.
Well, this certainly highlights our vulnerability. And it points to, the bigger discussion about disaster preparedness at every level, individual, community, government.
We need better systems, better infrastructure.
That's the argument. Better resilience, faster response. There's always the ongoing science looking at links to broader climate patterns, too, though connecting one specific event is always, complex.
Right. Okay, so staying with difficult news, but shifting focus. California. This explosion at a Planned Parenthood fertility clinic, and the FBI is treating it as potential terrorism. That's alarming.
It really is. That designation, potential act of terrorism, means the FBI likely believes it wasn't an accident.
Yeah.
That it was intentional, aimed at, intimidating people or coercing them.
And someone died.
Yes, tragically. 1 fatality and several injuries resulted from the blast.
So what are investigators doing right now? What's the focus?
Well, their first job is figuring out the cause. What kind of device was it? How was it set off? Forensics are key there.
Okay.
And at the same time, they're hunting for suspects. That means scouring surveillance footage, analyzing evidence from the scene, and following up any leads about who might have had a motive to target this clinic. Understanding why is critical in a terrorism case.
It definitely raises serious questions about protecting these kinds of facilities.
Absolutely. It's a sad reminder of the potential for violence against reproductive healthcare providers and the security challenges they face. How do you keep patients and staff safe? It's a tough question.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to Louisiana, New Orleans. 10 inmates escaping from a jail. That
Yeah.
sounds dramatic.
It is dramatic, and it creates a pretty significant public safety concern. 10 inmates getting out triggers a massive manhunt, as you'd expect.
Have they got any of them?
They have had some success. 3 of the 10 are back in custody, thankfully.
Okay, that's something.
But that still leaves 7 unaccounted for. So authorities are warning residents in the area to be vigilant, report anything suspicious.
You definitely have to ask how that happens. 10 inmates. How does security fail like that?
And that's exactly what the internal investigation is looking into. How did they get past the security measures? Was it a physical weakness in the jail, like locks or blind spots?
Or procedural?
Or procedural failures, yeah. Or even, the possibility someone on the inside helped. They have to look at everything to prevent it from happening again.
Makes sense. Okay, shifting gears now to politics. The release of the audio recordings from Special Counsel Hur's interview with former President Biden, that stirred things up again.
It really has. The written report was already out, but hearing the audio, it adds a different layer, right? We knew Hur had described President Biden's memory in certain ways, but now people can hear parts of the exchanges themselves.
And those reported pauses, the sort of halting delivery mentioned in the news.
Exactly. And her specific assessment, calling Biden's memory significantly limited, that's become a real flashpoint, especially now with the audio available.
So the political impact is pretty significant.
Oh, definitely. It's fueling the debate about, cognitive ability and fitness for office. For critics, this might seem like confirmation of their concerns. For supporters, they might hear it differently, argue it's taken out of context.
Right. It just adds fuel to an already existing fire, politically speaking.
It really does. It shows how these moments, these pieces of evidence, can really shape public perception and political narratives.
Yeah. And speaking of political battles, another development. Conservatives in Congress blocking that tax breaks bill. That seemed like a bit of a roadblock.
It was somewhat unexpected, yeah. This bill had some significant tax relief measures, but it hit a wall with opposition from some conservative members.
And their reasoning was?
Primarily concerns about the national debt. They argued the tax breaks weren't fiscally responsible, basically. Concerns about adding too much to the debt.
So where does that leave the bill? Is it just dead in the water?
Well, its future is definitely uncertain now. It really shows how difficult it can be to pass legislation, especially with tight margins and, ideological splits even within parties.
Compromise needed, probably.
Significant compromise, most likely, if it's going to move forward at all. It might have to look quite different from the original version.
And in the meantime, what's the effect? For businesses, individuals?
Well, there are real-world consequences. Businesses or people who were counting on those tax breaks, maybe for investment plans or hiring. Now there's uncertainty. It shows how these political fights in D.C. can ripple out.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, another big policy area being debated, clean energy tax credits. This feels like a really fundamental discussion.
It absolutely is. The decisions made about these credits, how big they are, who gets them, for what technologies will have a huge impact on the economy and on, our efforts to reduce emissions.
And there's so many different groups involved, right? All pushing for different things.
Exactly. You've got businesses wanting incentives for green tech. You have environmental groups pushing for really ambitious targets. And policymakers trying to balance it all, economic growth, jobs, climate goals. It's a complex mix.
Finding that balance must be incredibly difficult.
It is. They're debating the specifics. Which types of energy get priority? How long should the credits last? What are the rules for getting them? The long-term implications for our whole energy sector and the environment are just massive.
Definitely one to keep watching. Okay, and finally, moving to the world stage. Pope Leo XIV held his inaugural Mass at the Vatican, a major moment for the Catholic Church.
A hugely significant event, yes. It formally marks the start of his papacy, and it draws global attention, obviously.
I saw some prominent U.S. politicians were there, too.
Yeah, reports mentioned Senators J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio were in attendance, which, highlights that intersection of religion and global politics.
And what was the main message from his inaugural address?
From what we understand, he really focused on themes of unity and the need for peace in the world.
A timely message, given everything going on.
Very timely. A call for unity and peace tends to resonate widely, especially now.
A new pope starting his leadership role always gets a lot of attention globally.
Indeed. It matters not just for Catholics, obviously, but also for interfaith dialogue and just the role religious leaders can play on the world stage, addressing global challenges. The tone a new pope sets can be very influential.
Well, that really covers a lot of ground. Sunday, May 18th, 2025. quite a snapshot of the world right now,
Mm.
from accidents here in New York to global transitions. We hope this deep dive helped bring some clarity for you.
Absolutely. And just reflecting on everything we've touched on, infrastructure issues, natural disasters, political fights, global leadership shifts, it makes you wonder. Thinking about all these challenges and events, what single area do you think might have the most profound impact over the next year or so? And maybe more importantly, why? What connects these dots for you? Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.